Hi, I'm Seamless, and today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. Okay, ever since I started doing the string stuff, I was pretty well focused on knowing that I was going to at least try to synthesize a piano. This is as far as I have gotten. This is a difficult task, not so much because the core concept is difficult, but because what a piano is, as a thing, is a really complicated, it's the old world equivalent of a wavetable, where every individual note is perfectly set to be where it's supposed to be, so that the voicing that comes out of it is completely even harmonically all the way up and down the board. And this is achieved not just through there just being strings, but the strings doing the specific things that they're doing, which isn't just that there's a bunch of them. And it's a lot. And it means that no one particular kind of formula in any kind of synthesis I was going to do this and was going to be worked for the whole board. So you'll find out how I figured this and how I worked this through with Harmor. I got a lot further with this than I did with the citrus attempts. I'll tell you that much. So, this is a Harmor that's just this is by itself because I didn't put in a patcher because I'm weird like that. And then I made a patcher, and now I have two convolvers and a Maximus. These two convolvers represent basically the piano's body, and then the room, and then this. And this is just making it sound cool. So here's what it sounds like with it all. And here it is without it. That's what it's all about. Now, to break down the concept, I'm going to give you the big picture, and then I'm going to open up a new Harmor to show you the core beginning concept, and then I'll show you how all the differences happened that made that from there to this. And of course, the project and this FLP and whatnot, and the patcher, and also this dude are available to be downloaded if you need them to have the look and whatnot. But what this is, there's two parts, but let's check out the EQs. So this is pretty if you've ever seen the inside of a piano, you know what I was talking about the different configurations. The lower strings all have basically one big, huge string. Then the highest, when it gets pretty high, there starts to be two strings per note that are the same note. And then it gets to be three strings per note. And then really short, they're all three all the way up top. Now, what's special about the threes and the twos is that they're not just strings that are side by side. They're there and they're also offset. And they're offset specifically so that you can utilize phase cancellation to even the voicing. That's how the piano is doing that. That's what it's doing. And for the longer strings, that's just a positional thing, because where you strike a string in its length is akin to pulse width modulation. So for the lowest strings, that's enough to alter the voicing. So it's where you put the start and the end of the string determines what the voicing is. If you've ever seen the inside of a piano, all of the string settings are offset per note, even though the Harmor board's linear. And that's how you know how this goes. So that influenced a lot about how this ended up working out, because you can see this has 5 voices, this has 3 voices. That's not an irrelevant fact. How this managed to work out. I did build this from one voice, trying to emulate essentially a string, and then I tried to move forward with, all right, let's try just being that kind of practical about it. All right, now that we know that, let's talk about how to emulate the one string. So with Harmor, this is actually hilariously easier than all of the stuff that I was doing with Citrus. And that's just because Harmor has built in just a thing to do this. And I don't even mean the pluck or the blur, although I do use a lot of that. I actually mean the harmonic mode and the phaser option. Didn't that sound familiar just now? When you're in saw mode and you move around the width while you're in harmonic mode in the phaser, this is the harmonic result similar to pulse width modulation. I really hope that sentence made sense. Wow. This forced harmonic result, which is the Harmor telling each individual harmonic to be on and off just to make this happen in line, is what happens when you phase cancel some things together. And in the case of saw waves, if you phase cancel the two of them together a quarter, you get a square. And when you move them between phase, you get modulating the pulse of where the pulse is in the square. So if I want to mimic string stuff, there it is. I wondered why I always liked it. So to make this work, we're going to turn the speed off because we don't need it to move unless we tell it. So what I'm looking for right now is for its off point, because kind of like when you modulate the pulse of a square all the way off, it's off. You're just not making sound. It's like trying to pluck a string at its termination. You pretty well can't. You can, but the amplitude is 0. So that's what we want, amplitude 0 with nothing, so that when I can do this, we get a reality that's like you're modulating phase. So this is like the trick I was doing with Citrus, where I was doing the phase cancellation with the saws, but with FM and with additive saw structure, so that the kind of rubbing against the phase felt like the bow stringing. And that's actually still what we're doing here. It's just that this isn't the product of phase cancellation or anything. This is just a thing it's being told to do, and it happens to be aligned in the shape that is that, so it sounds like it. Isn't that ridiculous? My God. All right, so to make that work, we're now going to use it like it's a pluck. So here's something special about strings and pianos and plucking and bows. I was just mentioning bows, and because I was trying a lot to do the string thing, like the orchestra sort of viola stuff first, what I discovered was that the shape that sounds like a violin is this. This is sort of bowing result. And it has to do with how the energy transfer from a bow and like how fast and you're pushing and how fast, and it comes out like this. And you get that kind of relationship. Now, a hammer is the opposite kind of section, where it's like it's not a slow onset and then a fast catch. It's a fast hit and then a real sort of smish because it's felt tipped. So the smish is this sort of like, oh, it's slowed down real fast, but not so fast as to be sharp. This is a high frequency experience. This is what happened if you hit it with like wood, and then that'd be what happened if you hit it with metal. And that kind of thing, that sounds pretty hammery, doesn't it? Let's make sure we're doing this at our proper speeds. Although I'm doing this like we're building the sound again, but the basic idea isn't a whole lot more complicated than this, because once you build the sort of starting bit, everything else is just about just getting it into shape. It was just a lot of sculpting for how like you would think how specific making it sound like this is. And you can kind of hear how wonky some of the bits go. And I told you all that stuff about how the piano is actually built, because here's something absolutely hilarious. The kind of wrong this sounds is actually the kind of wrong you can make a piano sound if you're just bad at tuning a piano. If you don't know what the setup and the tuning is and the, whatever to do the thing because I've known piano tuners who could do it by ear, but I've also seen piano tuners with like freaking Spectrum equipment. And at first I didn't totally get why, but now I do. Because they're looking at this kind of thing, and they're trying to see that the stuff lines up in the way it's supposed to, so that you could have a flat surface where you play a note and it's the right, the right offset for all the notes. Which, like, when the piano was new, that was insane. I'm bringing that up because the work I'm trying to do here is so weird that it's essentially still the same thing. It's still just am I getting the right correct offset of phases or not? So let's go back to the other guy though before we talk about the unison. Wait, where'd the other guy go? Oh, there it is. All right, so along with this sort of basic phaser kind of action, the action after this is about key tracking and also the filter stuff. So there's two kinds of filter things. I actually did a bunch of filter things. A couple of optional ones that aren't part of like the kind of core idea, just to kind of fix problems I did with the core idea. But the 2 or 3 that matter most are pluck. And this is because this kind of energy fall off is actually pretty in line with what like strings are like just in general. But I mess with the specific curve in the other shape, and I'll show you how. On top of that, I do use a low pass a lot, but the low pass is interesting because when it comes to a piano sound, there's a result to velocity. It's a little bit like a snare drum. The tonality changes in certain ways that need to be adjusted for. One of them is that like how long higher energy lasts. So for example, a lower energy hit would result in something like this. And that's actually true for a piano. If you don't hit it so hard, it's a darker sound. And then if you hit it really hard, it lasts for a while. So the way you do that, you do velocity mapping. And this means that you can make that an energy thing that's just real. I have a keyboard here I'm smacking. After that, you do the same thing for the low pass, but the low pass also has a life, because the life of the low pass is that it has to follow around the thingy, but not completely. So a little bit, I took care of that with the global EQ, because kind of what I'm describing. It's like a secondary follower, not necessarily global EQ, because this is like a local EQ action. There's actually a real local EQ. And the difference between the local EQ and the global EQ is that this is not note specific. This is frequency specific, and this is note specific. So like I play a note that's A, and then whatever information I make is about a multiplier from there. And then here is like, oh, here's so many number of hertz. If I play a number of notes that is somewhere else, it's in a different action. So when it comes, oh boy, where was it? Oh yeah, so this action follows a note too. So this is kind of like a local EQ action, and that EQ action follows it perfectly. But that action is also too perfect. A lot of the synthy nature that happens. Oh yeah, I actually forgot this step completely, but that's because it's like the easiest one. But the one that makes all this sound way less synthy is to turn on phase randomness. Just do that. And then on top of that, per unison voice, same for all maps, two voices, panned. I got more complicated, but that's pretty good. Stereo wise. And also it solves a lot of that main like texture issue, which for Citrus, if I were to do that, would take a kind of a long time to solve. And it wouldn't be nearly as functionally good either. So, but with the filter stuff, this guy is too perfect. So we need one that follows it, but not so all the way up and down. And we can kind of accomplish that by doing this, because if you middle click it, it goes to 100%. And that means it will be a local effect. If I low passed it and set it to a value, every note will have that exact cut at that exact harmonic. So I want less than that, but not so much less that it stays at a value, because that's what this is for. And this guy primarily is mostly for this. This is so I can have those really high notes that don't pierce our ears. Harmor does a good job anyway doing that, which is I thought would be a problem here, but actually it worked out to our advantage doing piano stuff. Yeah. What else is important? Oh yeah, so the high pass. This is a holdover from doing the bow thing again. So the consequence of, actually, come to think of it, the high pass is a consequence of the pulse width modulation. I didn't need to do that. Wow, but I did anyway, so I want to go over it. What I'm talking about is that when I was mimicking the relationship of a string, what I was doing is I would automate down a high pass, and this is because that's just what it's like. The higher frequency junk catches first, and you can hear it more, and then the more power you push into it, the louder the lower frequency stuff gets. So then that's the transfer of energy, so that's how that works. And for a hammer, it works the same way. Excuse me. So again, you want that to kind of follow, but not so hard. Now, you are kind of you're hearing it sort of sound like a string, but not like a piano. And where it starts to get like a piano, and the step that made it the most like a piano right after this one, was utilizing the blur. Let's go to the advanced tab. The prism is also a big player in this, and that involves going, I forget where I put it in the order, but we're not gonna talk about this guy because the example is really already set up in the other one. But the blur, okay, good, all the way out here. So what the blur's job is, and oh yeah, I put these filters, I put this guy, that's how I did this. I think we'll find out anyway. Moral of the story is these motions from the pluck and the phaser are harsh and like clean and perfect, but we don't want that, and that's what the blur is good at doing. Oh, did that? Oh yeah, didn't that feel nice? So, two things. One, this is kind of like this already. Like you can get this to do this, but like you might not exactly want the high end to be so hot like that. And if you don't want to, you can turn on the pluck on the blur, and now the pluck's shape and time becomes what ends up being the blur. Of course, I forgot it was blurring it, and it was the pluck, so that's why I didn't do that. But yeah. Moral of the story is blurring all of that so you can still kind of see the action. And what's real nice about it is that it's not adding a release. It's not adding release time to your notes. It's just blurring the action in the notes while you're holding it. And when you let go of it, you let go of it. So it actually does a good job of, honestly, like a really complicated process and like in a regular audio processing thing that it would do there to blur it up like that. But you can just do that. Harmor. So in here's the real guy. Again, you're hearing it outside of its thing. I'm really up on the honk and tonkin on this one. I'll show you how to not do that if you don't want to. So hard to hear that, the compression. Each of these dudes was the same guy, one of those, before I made him and cloned him. And then I put on some unison, and then a lot of stuff got key tracked. Like, I key tracked this guy. I key tracked this guy. I think I key tracked some more stuff. This dude, yeah, a little bit, but like only for the highest bits. And this is actually because like most of the action is kind of stays more or less normal until the highest frequencies get like those really small strings get weird. Did I do the position? Nope, just that. Good. I don't like when I have to mess with that. And then I made a really long tail on this, so like. Yeah. Where did I put the blur? Oh, I put it. Yes. So I put the filter. And the reason why the filter, like the note still sounds harsh, is because the filter is after the blur, and the blur is not blurring that. Yep. So the honkin' tonkin'. So what's happening here is I'm upping the pitching, but what's happening is I'm also keyboard tracking this, but the envelope also is coming up. The reason, like, I want them. I made it too perfect, and I know what it sounds like when it's too perfect, and it's a bit weird when you play like an octave on your piano and the harmonics are so perfectly aligned that it doesn't sound like you're playing two notes. I actually did something else more drastic to solve this as an issue. I'll show you in a second. But essentially, with the way this is set up, all I gotta do to reduce it is just burp, burp, and better. So the more drastic thing I did was, it was in this one. Where is it? Yep. And I only did this in one of them because the idea here was what I just said. I don't really want it to be perfect. So I offset the entire pitch tracking I keyboard mapped the pitch tracking to give it an offset of 1 cent from the whole end to the whole other end. So that means that like it's just ever so slightly off. And I want to think that piano tuners do this on purpose, or maybe they just do it perfectly because they know that it'll immediately become imperfect. You hit it once and then you've loosened everything. But because you could do that with physical media. That degree of sort of turning this into some imperfections is really what made this sound a halfway reasonable past all that stuff you saw me do there. Right, so we got two of these dudes. The reason I'm keyboard tracking these in the first place is because of all that stuff I just said, in a big way, applies to lower notes. Like, that sounds kind of synthy and weird right now, but it sounded even weirder when it was like too perfect. So I have the prisms on and the unison on pretty hard, and I have a weird unison shape going on for both of these. Not the unison, there it is. And so it's doing its weird self. It's doing stuff, and like I don't even need to care what it is or even show you what it is or care why it's like this, because the whole point is A, that's different, and B, that like it's just some amount of on. And I did make sure to have the lowest fundamentals still like there for one of them, so that there would always be a correct note. And even that still counts. Like, I find it interesting about working on this particular project with the piano process is because usually when I make these sounds, the first thing I get right is the lower bit. And then this was actually the complete opposite. I figured out how to make the high end sound like a piano, and I genuinely worked down. Now, after making this, which was just a huge trial by ear. Oh yeah. So when did I know when? Because I knew the next step was going to be I was going to put this into a body in a room, and it would sound a lot better. But how did I know when I would get what I was doing would be what would be that would sound good? Christ, I hope that sentence made sense. What I did know was that a lot about that truth of like what a string is, and then there was just the rest of it was just mid-tone stuff. Like once I got the top end filter and the bottom end filter, the plucking and the blur, and then the pitching kind of correct. Actually, the pitching is basically the whole concept of the tone. This curve on the keyboard mapping, actually. See, if I go real high, it sounds like a laser, but it doesn't have to. But a little bit of motion actually makes it not just sound more realistic, but like I actually think the tuning also involves the concept of forward phase, that like you hit it and it's a little bit wrong, but it's wrong in the right direction. And like I might be reading way too hard into what a piano is, but like you have to know these things. And like I also because of learning how to synthesize all the strings, I'm realizing that like a lot of those instruments are targeted builds for a reason. Because it's hard to make a thing that works like with a string and a setup that sounds good outside of a certain few octaves. So like the piano was just like, I have a bed of all of them, because it literally had a bed of all of them, and like that would have been like NASA level engineering, or some guy's crazy like Yabahar level like hobbyist stuff. Who knows? Bach knew. Well, let's talk about the body. So, what I did here, this first dude is one of the small room dudes, because I treated the idea of what the piano is as essentially a string in a small room, and I made it smaller, and I made the envelope even smaller. You get the envelope by coming down here, boop boop. The main bit is still on, and this is kind of a to taste thing, because if I just didn't like, because this is where it first starts, because then it goes into the next one, and it also has a dry and a wet, but because this is the main dry, if I don't have it in there, then it doesn't get in there either. So I was just balancing there, a little bit of EQ and stuff, not a lot. This one is actually like another, just like a real room concept, and then more EQing, just more lengthening to taste, and dry and wetting to taste, and then a bunch of basically OTTing the crap out of it, but mostly with an eye that I was going to use this to do the primary like character edit too. I wanted to get away with not doing EQing, and the way that I did that was to isolate this big old mid band and turn it way the hell down. Leaving the bass kind of where it was, like it's turned down too, but that's also because the bass coming out of the synth level wildly is overrepresented compared to what like a regular piano was like coming into a room. So I just really like this is what it's like without it. Like it's right, but it's beefy. And then yeah, way up high, that's giving it that kind of rock piano sound, that kind of overcompressed 80s feel. And then boofing, because I like the boof stuff. I know that word means other things other places, but it's essentially what's happening when I compress things. That's all there is really at the post of this sound. The hard work of this was leveraging using the phaser's harmonic mode for its purpose of mimicking pulse width modulation, linking that concept to the idea of whacking a string in a position also being the width of the pulse, modulating it accordingly, fitting it all with the motion of what the hammer would be, and then also calculating the, like, not necessarily calculating, I didn't literally use numbers, but with your ears, figuring out what sounds good about the spread of how things are balanced. And it's all about the keyboard mapping to do that, and it's not always super obvious, because you might think, cool, I'll just go down up on all the parameters. But sometimes some of the things are like, okay, I go play a higher note, but those high notes have very few harmonics in them, which means relative to the local EQ concept, I actually came down pretty far on something. And that's actually probably this guy. Yep. So, and he's got the velocity there too. That's what the slap is, because low value. And this is also before the blur, doing its thing. Did I do anything with the blur mask? I think I did. Yep. So I'm letting some of the more specific detail that I put in the low end to be a thing, but not a lot of that like high burny stuff. This is also how you can make it not do as hard on things, because it does what you think it does. But this is oh hey, it is local. Yeah, so that's per note deal. I could actually just kind of do one of these, so I can get the high frequency smack, but not the the burn. Yeah. So as far as an attempt, this is okay. I learned a lot about not just like hitting this, but also like what a reed instrument is. Isn't that a weird segue to get through from here? But that is what I got through to get here. Getting that like, oh, the reason why I keep sidetracking myself into like woodwindy sounding things when I'm trying to do brass sounding things is I keep forgetting that brass is not a saw wave. It's a pulse width modulated square. Because a brass instrument is basically an inverted string you're blowing into to vibrate, and with your mouth. Am I doing this the other way around? Is that the fuck? Are you the string in that analogy? The point is that one of them is shaped differently, and one of them is a pulse, and the other one's not. And the differences are specific, are specific enough that if I do the wrong one, I end up always making one particular kind of instrument, and then I end up doing that kind of like. I a bit embraced the wrong one because if I'm trying to make a string and I end up making an oboe by accident, I'm not going to necessarily be like, oh, cool, I'll just make an oboe. But I did, and then I learned. And I learned this. Isn't that a weird way about it? Sometimes you have to embrace the chaos of your strange ideas. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. I normally have a lesson sale going on for July, but I actually have had a sale going on all year and will continue to have the sale going on for the rest of the year. There's information about that in the video description, along with other stuff, such as this preset and this patcher patch, if you like to mess around with them yourself. There's no FLP to speak of, to be perfectly honest, there's nothing here. Yeah. Did I already say that commenting and subscribing, all that good stuff, and as usual, have a nice day. Yes, do that too.